Most people start self-improvement by adding more habits, more routines, and more information. And that's exactly why they get stuck. I made the same mistakes when I first started, and it slowed everything down. If I had to restart my self-development journey, I'd focus on these 9 things, not to do more, but to progress faster. In this video, I'll break down exactly what accelerated my growth and what I'd stop doing immediately. The first thing I would do in my self-development journey is understand that there is risk in everything, right? Oftentimes in life, we're debating between 2 possible cases or scenarios, right? We either move back home after college or we stay and try to figure things out alone, right? But understanding that the safe option isn't always the right option, because oftentimes there's also risk in staying home. For example, my situation, I decided to stay out and move out of home when I was 18. I finished college at the age of 22, but decided to stay out. And part of that reason was because I didn't want to lose the independence that I already gained. There was a risk in moving back home too. For me, if I chose to move back home, that would mean that I would lose my friends, I would lose the relationships, I would lose my ability to take care of myself, to pursue bodybuilding as a passion of mine, to build a podcast, which I now have, right? All these things were on the line if I were to move back home, right? But oftentimes we don't see it that way. We see it in such a way that, well, moving home is the financially wise thing to do. That's what everyone else does. And so therefore it's the right thing, right? But understanding that there is risk in everything that we choose. There's risk to going to college and not going to college, right? Obviously, going to college has this more secure or quote unquote secure guaranteed result, right? Even though I don't believe that there's any guarantees in life, but the alternative of starting your own business or, pursuing that passion of content creation that you've always wanted to do, that itself is a risk that you're choosing to leave behind if you were to go after college, right? So, and there's always these 2 sides of the coin that you have to assess as you are making decisions in life, ultimately. The next thing is to start to see every failure as a win, right? There is no win-loss in life. There is only win and learn. Once you start seeing life in this way, you really realize that there's no way that you can ever lose out of any situation, because even your failures, your biggest failures, are the biggest lessons that you'll ever learn. And moving forward from that situation, you can then make better decisions down the road, right? And that's something important that I didn't realize until later on, because until I was okay with failing, until I was okay making mistakes, I was so afraid to start. I was so afraid to try, right? But I saw this video the other day. It's like, when did trying ever become not cool, right? When did trying ever become like this thing that uncool people do, right? It's so cool to try. It's so cool to fail, right? And I think oftentimes, like, we often bash people that have tried and fail, and there's people online that will tell you that you can't do it. But I really think that the reason that I'm where I am today in terms of the things that I've been able to do, not that I've figured it all out, but the place and the success and the job that I currently have is all due to because I tried multiple interviews and I failed completely on all of them until I landed this job, right? And I think the mindset you have to have is that it only takes one win to actually do the thing that you want to do, right? It takes one sale to sell that one thing that you want to sell, right? And that's all it takes. You need to only get into one college for you to have a college education. You need to get into one med school for you to get into med school, right? And so understanding that, the rule of just one, realizing that yes, there are going to be a lot of failures that lead up to that result, but that's not the end of the day for you, right? That's just the beginning. So the third one is that actions precede motivations. Oftentimes we think that we need motivation to start something, to do something, to put your running shoes on, right? And we always wait for that feeling to come up before we even take action. But something that I learned along the way was that the more you do something, the more motivated you'll feel. When I started my fitness journey, it was difficult for me to start working out, just like anyone else, right? You don't come out of the womb, wanting to lift weights and do all the things that a full-on 18-year-old, 20-year-old adult does, right? You tend to learn that over time. And for me, I learned that much quicker just by doing, right? Even when I didn't feel like it, I put on my running shoes, I started going out for a jog, and 5 minutes in, I felt good about it, right? And that's not to say like every time you put on your running shoes, you're gonna feel like running after, but that process, that habit takes time to build. And so you have to be patient, you have to give it that time, that chance. an opportunity for you to build that muscle, because it's something that you have to work out and it gets stronger over time. So don't wait for motivation to come about. Just start doing the thing that you've always wanted to do, and motivation will follow, I promise you. The fourth thing is to be okay with being different. Something my mom told me when I was really young was that you aren't meant to fit in, and you shouldn't, right? If you're doing the same thing that everyone else is doing, then why should you expect a different result? I think that's a really eye-opening insight, because oftentimes we are just following the crowd, right? We swim with the stream, right? How often do we go against what society tells us? How often are we pushing against, what we're taught, what we're told? And I think this is one of the greatest lies that I think society sometimes puts across our face or across our minds, is that we have to do this because everyone else does. We have to go to college because everyone else does, right? And obviously I gave into that. I went to college for nursing and I got a stable job, thankfully, but that's not always the case. I know so many friends that go to college and didn't get anything and are now working minimum wage as a fast food worker, right? These situations and these stories, I think, are so true, but they also paint the picture of how important it is to realize that, being different, taking the alternative path, not moving back home for me from college was a huge step, and probably one of the best decisions that I could have made in my life, because it allowed me to exercise more independence, learn things on my own, and just become and grow into my own person. All things that I probably wouldn't have been able to do had I not moved out. The fifth one I'd say is probably working for free. That's something that definitely took a lot of mental shift to wrap my head around, but realizing that working for free and that experience is the price that you're paid is something that I wish I had understood sooner. I spent probably around 6 or 7 years working as a camp counselor, and this was a really fun time in my life, but I also was severely underpaid. But I think the skills and things that I learned from that job definitely set me up for success for every other job after. I remember also working at Chipotle for very, very little money at the time. It was my first ever official job, and for what I was doing, scrubbing grills and prepping literally all the food. If you ever worked at fast food, you know what it's like. But it was extremely difficult, and I think the payoff definitely was not worth it at the time, looking back. But realizing that working these jobs definitely builds your appreciation for money. It builds your understanding of how much hard work it takes to make X amount of dollars an hour, right? And once you start to value, you have that kind of adjustment in your head and you understand the value of money, you start to appreciate it more. You start to spend less because you understand how much hard work it took to get there. And so just realizing and understanding the value of the dollar was a very important lesson, I think, that definitely took a lot of working underpaid hours to learn. The sixth thing I'd say is to take extreme ownership over what you're doing, right? Obviously, we're imperfect human beings. We make mistakes. There's things that we do that we often regret. There's things that we do that we wish we can go back on and change, right? But unfortunately in life, there's only so much you can do. And once you make those mistakes, the best thing you can do is often take ownership for it, right? And I think I would even go so far to say that even when it's not your fault, learning how to take ownership over those things. And I think that's when you really reach this point of maturity, that you understand that life and team and working with others is a team effort. These things are things that you have to do in order to be able to operate together, right? And so learning extreme ownership, and there's a book that actually talks about this completely, but taking extreme ownership over the things that you're doing allows people start to notice, and people start to realize how much they like working with you, because even when it's not your fault, you're willing to pick up the slack and to do whatever it takes to get there. And so realizing that extreme ownership is something that's really important to learn, and it's not something that you can learn really overnight. It's something that takes time to make those mistakes and then to take those responsibility, or to even go so far as to take the responsibility for things that you didn't necessarily make a mistake on. The seventh thing is to help others even when it's not convenient. This one's actually one of probably the most challenging ones on this list, because it's just so difficult to help others when it's inconvenient for you. It's so easy for us to help others when it's on the way, right? I'll drive this person home because it's on the way back, or I'll lend a few dollars because I just got change from the bank or whatever, or from this restaurant, right? But how often do we go out of our way to help somebody, right? Like random acts of kindness. And I think this is definitely one of those ideas that sets you up for success later on in life, because you learn that there is this selflessness to self-development, right? Oftentimes, like the usual self-development gurus will talk about how important it is to do this and that, and all of that is to benefit yourself at the end of the day. But once you start being able to help others and to learn like that helping others does come around to helping you. I remember one of those examples was when I had the opportunity to actually work at the current job that I have now. And part of that was building a good relationship with the employees, of being able to do a good job with my reports. And this was me working at a home health agency. And so I remember a few months down the road, I got reached out to a friend. He was like, I'm looking for work, I can't find it. He's a nurse as well. And I was actually able to refer him over to the agency that I'm working at now. And at the end of the day, he got a job. I got the good recommendation from that, and it was a win-win. And so I think that story just shows like that there is benefit out there, right? What comes around goes around, and there's this balance in the universe, if you will, of like goodness that oftentimes isn't shared. And if we just kind of took and tapped into that, there's so much potential in terms of the goodness that we can bring into not only our own lives, but into the lives of others. And so that really brings us to the 8th one, which is to value people before profits. This is something that I learned as I was actually pursuing business opportunities early on in my career, when I was kind of somewhat in affiliate marketing. But I really enjoyed, and I stole this from one of their values, that always prioritize people before you prioritize profits, right? Because money is only a reflection of the influence that you bring to others. And I think oftentimes we are so focused on just making more money. We are focused on building up our financial, well, so to speak, right? We're so captivated by this idea of like our net worth, how much savings we have, how do we get more out of what we already have. But when we truly help people, when we seek other people's benefits over ourselves, that really changes the script. That really flips it so that we stop really focusing on money, right? Which is this thing, obviously, that's important. But at the end of the day, like, people aren't going to remember you by how much money you made or, anything of that sort. They're going to remember you by how you made them feel. What are the changes that you made in their life? What are the impacts that you had on who they are and who they are today, right? And what changes, what impressions did you leave on them? And I think that's the most important thing, as I, currently am making a good amount of money, and I'm realizing now at this point in my life that it's so much more important to actually leave an impact on those people that you get to hang out with, right? That gift of being able to talk to others and to leave a lasting impression on them is so much more important than just making more money, right? The last one I'd say is like to become insanely good at time management. And this is one of those that I think continually take work over time, right? It's not like you get good at managing your time overnight. There's a lot of things that I do to kind of manage my time. Maybe I'll go into that in a later video, but it's so important because time is the single thing that you can't get back. And so the question I like to ask myself every day is, how do I make the most of these 24 hours? Because everyone has the same 24 hours, but not everyone spends it the same way, right? Check your screen time, check how you're, utilizing your mornings, your nights, what do your routines look like? All of these things play into our use of that 24 hours. And, over the span of years and years, you get to look back and see that you either were a good steward of that time or you weren't, right? And that's admittedly what's going to result in you becoming the person you either want to be, or the person you resent, and the person you hate, and the person that you're not proud of, right? And I think managing time is one of the most important skills that I think we just aren't taught in school. It's ironic that we go through a whole college education and we still don't really have classes on like time management and how to do things. When I became a nurse, one of the biggest things that was most challenging was probably learning how to do all these things in this set given time, right? And I would say that through nursing, I definitely learned a lot of how to manage my time, how to prioritize, how to time block, and how to kind of schedule out things on my calendar. But until then, I would say that it was very tough for me to know what to do first, right? And that's the discomfort that I kind of sat with for a really long time. And I would say that in general, like, that's probably the the one thing that I'm still continuing to work on today, right? Because there's always more that I can do with my time. And I think it's worth saying also that like not everything is worth your time. And so realizing that once you get into this point of life where there's so many good things in front of you and you get to kind of choose and pick what you want to spend your time on, that's a really good place to be, because now you are the author of your own life, right? And obviously God is in that picture, and he's the one that is ultimately in control of the things and the plans and the aspirations that you have. But when you get that choice, you have freedom. That's when you have that choice, you have a say in the person that you want to become. All right, so just to summarize, right? 9 things to kickstart your self-development journey. Number 1, risk everything, right? Be willing to be okay with losing, because understand that every situation you go to is going to have a pros and a con, right? Number 2, start seeing the wins as wins and failures as growth, right? Just because you fail, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's just an opportunity for you to grow and live into the next thing and make better actions and make better results, right? Number 3, actions precede motivation, right? Don't think that you have to feel motivated in order to start. Just start and motivation will follow. Number 4, be okay with being different, right? You're not always going to be the same person, and that's okay, and that's actually a good thing, right? You were created as a unique individual to do the things that you ultimately love to do, and so keep doing those things, pursue those things, and the good things will follow. Number 5, work for free. Be okay with building experience when you're young. Be okay with making mistakes, because those mistakes are cheaper when you're young. When you're old, those things cost a lot more, right? Number 6, take extreme ownership. Know that not every mistake that you make or the people around you is going to be your fault, but when you own up to those kind of things, you'll get big respect in return. Number 7, help others not only when it's convenient, knowing that help is all around us, right? There's always a profound amount of help, and so there's more enough to go around. The more good you do, the more good you expect in return. Number 8, right? People before profits. Know that you can prioritize people because money will follow influence, right? Money is a result of impact that you leave on others, and so focus on leaving that impact on others, and the money will then follow after. The last one is become insanely good at time management, right? If you can't manage your time, you can't manage your life. And so start by managing the things that are most important to you, the thing that you can't get back, and that's time. Value every second of it, and the way you spend it will determine the rest of your life. See you in the next one.